Hey, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, my name is Adam, and joining me, my co host, Ben Adams. Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic: why fewer people are moving to Denver today, and how that's changing the city that we've called home for now, going for me on 40 plus years. You know, it's hard to believe Colorado has dropped all the way down to 40th place on U-Haul's recent 2024 Growth Index. This after being in the top 10 not too long ago. So what is going on? Well, we're going to explore all of this and some of the biggest factors driving this shift, like housing affordability, job market changes, and even just quality of life concerns. Plus, we're going to talk about what this could mean for Denver in 2025. Really excited to share this episode with you guys. Let's go. Ben, what is up, my man? Welcome back. It's been a couple weeks. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be back. We're in season 2 here of the Pursuit of Progress 2025, and a lot to look forward to. So very, very excited to be back here and get back at it.
Yeah, man, I feel bad not having you on the episode 1 of our season 2. We had just a lot of holiday stuff going on with both of us, with our families, and Ben was out of town for a bit down in Arizona, and I just wanted to make sure we started our season 2 right off the bat with the first episode in 2025. So excited to have you back, since you provide a ton of value and you're a great co-host on the show with me, man. So let's just kind of dive right in. I'd love to kind of lead this podcast conversation and then ask these questions for you, since you're an expert on several of these points that we prepared today. Again, all about just what is causing Colorado to take such a dramatic shift from being one of the most popular places for people to move to today being in the bottom 20% at 40 out of the 50 states.
Yeah, and what's so cool about this is that is there any better growth index to use than U-Haul's? U-Haul's growth index. I mean, is this kind of what they do? They're in the management of helping people relocate from one city to another, and they're not just a moving company. They have this really powerful index, and I'm so excited that we're talking about it, because you're right. Denver went from a top 10 destination to now in the bottom 10 as far as people leaving the state. So why is that happening? We have 5 really awesome points to go through, and let's jump right in.
Cool, man. Yeah. So, the first one, and these aren't in any particular order, but this is one that I would definitely have also, guessed or just put on my list if I was asked this on the street. And this is just the rising housing costs. So tell me a little bit about your take on this one.
Yeah, rising housing costs. I call that housing affordability. Working for a bank that's licensed in all 50 states, I get to work with customers that are all over the country. A lot of my business is here in Denver, but I'll work with customers that are in Florida, Arizona, a lot right now in the Midwest and the Sun Belt. And it's very challenging for people just to afford a place to live, whether they rent or own. And that's just the unfortunate reality. In 2024, the average median home price is $585,000 in the Denver market, and that's a significant bump up from 2023. And when you're looking at mortgage payments, and this is also something that I think about a lot. Part of the reason that we're in the predicament that we're in 2024 and now into 2025 is because how quickly interest rates rose. So it wasn't just the fact that they went up so much. It's the fact they went from in the 2s to in the 7s, but then also over just a 24-month period. So what happened is sellers got locked into their current house. But this is something that no one ever talks about. At least I've not heard anyone talk about it in this format, where part of the issue is that leading up to this, interest rates were so low that affordability was so cheap back in 2020 and 2019. So, housing costs were really too cheap because of interest rates. And that was also before we had the big run up in real estate prices. So in just a matter of a couple of years, values explode and then interest rates also explode. And so if you're walking your dog down the street in January of 2022, you're taking him for a walk around your block, and you could tell your friend that to live at this house costs $2,000 a month. Well, in January 2025, you're walking your same dog with the same friend, except your mortgage payment to own that house would probably be somewhere closer to 4,500. And that's just the reality of where it's at. And another thing, when you talk about affordability, it's not just property values and interest rates. It's also about property taxes as well. Not just here in Denver, but all across the United States. Property taxes are at all-time highs in most markets. And then you think about what's happening in the homeowners insurance world. There's crisis slash major reform going on. You have insurance companies pulling out of markets. Premiums are skyrocketing. Coverages are shrinking. Deductibles are increasing. So home values are the highest they've ever been. Interest rates are at a 20-year high. Property taxes are at or near an all-time high. And then homeowners insurance as an all-time high. And this is just in the last 3 or 4 years.
It's been a very interesting past few years. At least in Colorado, we do our property tax assessments every other year on odd number years. So we have that coming up this year in 2025. Do you think that's going to affect any of this at all? Do you think that'll, cause any other issues with people staying on the fence, on the sidelines, not entering into the market to try and buy or sell?
It's a great question. And here in Denver, Colorado, or in the state of Colorado, we had the Gallagher Amendment that was repealed 4 or 5 years ago. And the residential property taxes really increased after that. Before, the Gallagher Amendment protected or it limited or reduced the amount of residential property tax increases that could happen year over year. The tax burden was also shared with commercial properties and business owned properties, so that tax burden was shared. When that was repealed, that's no longer shared, and there are no longer caps on how much residential property taxes can rise. So, the assessed value is supposed to be a derivative of, you have your market value, which is what the home is worth, and then you have the assessed value, which is how the county assesses or determines the property taxes. I'm always cautious, to answer your question, of homes that are in metro districts, planned unit developments. A lot of times these are going to be newer construction where the property taxes not only pay for the home, but it also really funds the entire community, the schools in that community, parks, recreation areas. And I found that property taxes in some of these metro districts can be double or triple of what they are in some of the older single family residence neighborhoods that you would see. And that's always a huge shock. I've come across homes that they're just regular priced homes, 500,000, but they have the property taxes of a home that would cost $1.5 million. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you have a buyer that's living in that type of home and they can afford that type of home, well, all of a sudden, if you have property taxes that are triple what they should be or what that homeowner is going to be accustomed to, it's going to cause a major affordability crisis there. And I have seen homeowners sell their home because of the property taxes.
Yeah, you think of, like the area that I'm in, I think it's about 0.4 or maybe about 0.5% for property taxes. I was down at a new build community in Southwest Denver, down in Southwest Littleton, I should say. And they
Hmm.
were saying, I think it was like 1.4, 1.5.
Yeah.
So you think of, just for a round number, $1 million home, that's an extra $10,000 a year you're paying in taxes. Definitely significantly changes if you have a loan out on that home, just what your monthly payment's going to be, the overall monthly payment.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of homeowners don't always, I would say, especially this time of year, that's one of the reasons that I get the most calls. My mortgage payment is changing. I'm on a 30-year fixed. How is that possible? And homeowners aren't understanding your financing terms aren't changing. The interest rate's not changing. Your principal and interest is not changing. It's your homeowner's insurance, your property taxes. And then what you just described, when there is a big adjustment in the property taxes or homeowners insurance, not only do they increase, but it then causes a shortage in the escrow account where to get it caught up, they then have to charge more. So a lot of times it's not uncommon to have your escrow payment increase by $200 or $300 a month. And for most people, that's very substantial.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll just mention before moving on to our next topic or our next point is, this is also, though, for rising housing costs, it's not just the cost to buy, it's also just rental.
Yeah.
Costs are also very, very high in Denver based off of, what people are able to afford on their, the median or the average income in Denver versus what the rents are. There's a big disparity when you compare that to other, markets like places in Arizona, Oklahoma, some of the Sunbelt states.
Hmm.
I know that I saw a stat when we were doing some research before today's episode that I think 40%, right around that, are for Denver renters are considered cost burdened, meaning that,
Yeah.
close to half of renters are having a hard time just paying their rent. Just to really give you an even, deeper dive into just the overall situation that's going on right now in Denver and affordability.
Yeah, and you probably saw there were some recent Denver Post articles talking about landlords here in the Denver metro market that were using pricing software to really
Mm-hmm.
maximize the amount of rent that they could get from their tenants. And what's so interesting is I've been in my home now for over 10 years. When I bought my home, my mortgage payment is it's $1,700. And when I bought my home, I was coming from the Phoenix market, and at that time, Phoenix home values were about half of what they were in Denver. And so when I bought my home here, that mortgage payment just sounded so big and so outrageous. And this is back in 2014, 2015. 10 years later though, that is nothing now. That is nothing. And I always say that at least if you own a home right now, you're the tide is being raised for everyone that's a homeowner. So at least you do have that record equity if you are a homeowner. The real challenge though, and what's most unfortunate is for those that aren't in the market currently. So first-time home buyers, they don't have the benefit of that record equity or getting all of those equity gains for the past couple of years. So if you are a first-time home buyer, you want to buy a home, um, you might have to buy out of market, and that's just the reality. If you don't have a down payment, I will do first-time home buyer loans for someone that does down payment assistance or has a minimum down payment, and it's not uncommon for the mortgage payment to be $4,500 or $5,000 a month. That's a lot. I mean, that I don't care who you are, that is a lot, especially for a first-time home buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel for those people as a challenging time, but hopefully, this is just like you said, just a tide. Tides come in and they go out. So just
That's
got to
right.
be patient. And, one last thing on this is just taking advantage of opportunities in times like this to just educate yourselves, just being mindful of if it is a time where maybe it's just not, the most opportune time for a first time home buyer to buy a home, at least just instead of just sitting on the sidelines, not doing anything, still, getting used to the market, understanding just what it takes to buy a home. So all of that, that groundwork has been done where when the tides do change, at that point, you're in a position to act, you're in a position to make a smart, sound decision. And, at the
Mhm.
end of the day, hopefully that'll pay off. And, everything happens for a reason. And you guys will hopefully be successful, even if it does take another couple years.
That's right. And ultimately, you want to be able to make an informed financial decision. So get to know the area and the market that you're looking at. Start refining your skills. You want to be able to develop an eye for what's out there and what's available at what price. That way, if you find something that's undervalued, you recognize it immediately. Start running payment quotes, get an idea of what the payments are, stay on top of interest rates. Of course, you don't have to do this stuff and you can leave it up to professionals, but what you're saying is that you want to be informed, you want to sharpen your skills. And this is one thing that I talk about, and I will share this with first-time homebuyers. The idea and the thought of being a first-time homebuyer and going straight into investing sounds crazy, but there are some like that is becoming more common, and I'm seeing that more where you might have someone who's renting in Denver, and instead of buying a primary in Denver, they're buying a single family or a duplex somewhere in the Midwest that's much more affordable. So that way they're getting into the market, they're developing some cash flow, they're still putting their money to work for them, and maybe that allows them to subsidize their more expensive rent here in Denver. So there are options. You don't have to, most people do go the route of the first home they buy is the home that they live in, but it doesn't mean you have to do that.
Yeah, that's good advice. Let's talk about our second point, which is job market changes. So this is one that Denver's changed a lot in the last, couple decades since we've been graduated from college and entering into the, the workforce. So I've definitely noticed this just with the, increase in technology-based jobs. Just
Mhm.
some of the changes. 20 years ago, oil and gas industry was very big in Denver. A lot of that is, kind of died down and has moved into other states like, Austin and different cities, I should say, like Austin and Dallas, Houston, some of the Texas areas.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think it's changed a lot just in our conscious, the last 20 years of being aware of this. But what's your opinion on just more specifically recent, in the last year or two, and how this is also really affecting just the amount of people that are leaving rather than coming to Denver?
Yeah, I feel like, the thing that I notice the most would be retail. When I'm driving around, I just see a lot of vacancies in retail, and then also commercial, office buildings, down, skyscrapers downtown, apartment buildings. I read an article recently saying that 60 to 65% of the offices available in downtown Denver are vacant, and that is just an astonishing stat. And I think there's more to it than just things slowing down. I think our how we live and work is radically changing, and so
Yeah.
I think that's also a part of it. But some cities have a really defined image, and Pittsburgh, there's a lot of steel and railroad out there, and like you were mentioning, Houston, a big oil city. Tulsa's that way. um, and Denver, we've, I don't know, like what is our, like, what are we here? Like, what kind of town would you say?
Yeah, I, mean, I don't know. I think tech. Just we have some different Google offices. We've got just a lot of stuff going on with. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. We're not like this very like stereotypical, just like one or two industries. Your point a second ago about the the changing of how people work nowadays, and a lot more people work remotely. You think just that aspect alone would actually be another argument for why more people would want to move here, because they're moving to a state where they can enjoy more, amenities of
Hmm.
the state, yet work for a company that maybe is based out of, somewhere in the Sun Belt or, anywhere outside of Colorado. But since most people are able now to work remotely to some level, some of those people maybe be choosing, preferring to live in Denver. So yeah, it's interesting. This is a tough one. I don't really have my pulse on it that well.
Yeah, it's always like with the remote work stuff, if you can bring dollars in that are more representative of a higher price market into a lower price market. So for Denver, like if you're able to bring like your Silicon Valley dollars into Denver because you can work remotely out of Silicon Valley, like you'll be able to afford it. And so that's always the biggest thing. And I think that is happening right now, except you'll see folks that maybe are, they're moving to some of these other lower price markets to kind of get a little bit of ahead and kind of build some momentum a little bit.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's very interesting. I think I would say, this isn't specific to Denver, but with the mountains, a lot of recreation, tourism. I know that we have a tremendous appeal, really a worldwide appeal, and you'd know this better than I would, just with all of the resorts and the mountains and the skiing. Um, so yeah, I think, but how does that impact affording housability in the Denver marketplace?
Hmm. Yeah, this is a tough one. So we won't, stick on this one too much longer. But I think you had a couple interesting stats you shared with me too about a couple customers and just how much appreciation they saw in their investments just since COVID. This was not for Denver. This was some other states, some other cities.
Yeah, I've had several customers that I've worked with in Miami, Southern Florida, and the market down there has just absolutely exploded. I had one customer that bought kind of right before COVID. He bought a high rise condo down in Miami, and he bought this thing for 450,000. He just sold it the last couple of months for close to 1 million.
Wow, good for him.
We're talking 2 or 3 years. I have another couple who I also helped in 2021, and they bought their single family residence. This is right outside Coral Gables, but they bought their single family residence for 650,000 back in 2021. They just sold it for I think it was 3 million. And we're literally not even talking 36 months there. So they had aspirations to start building a rental portfolio, and but we talked about it and we looked at the numbers. They were married, the fact that the capital gains were tax free up to 500,000. And what was interesting is because the property taxes are so high in Florida, the rent that they would have gotten would barely have covered the mortgage payment. So it's like, would you rent this property and barely cover the mortgage, or possibly even take a small loss? Or would you prefer to walk away with an additional $600,000? So that's ultimately what they ended up doing. That's tax free, after you factor in some of the closing costs and everything else. So they got this huge windfall just from a couple years.
That's awesome. Let's talk about our next one. So our next reason why we think a lot of people are leaving Colorado this year is just some of these quality of life concerns. And we can go a few different directions on this one, but I'll let you kick us off on this one.
Well, let's talk about Denver. Maybe that's one thing Denver really is known for: traffic. And one thing that when I think of Denver, I just think of when you go to some of these other big cities, Dallas, Phoenix, Arizona, for example. I lived in Phoenix for 10 years. And the thing about Phoenix was their highway infrastructure was just so incredible. They would have 7 or 8 lanes each direction. And then they had highways all over the place. They had the I-10, the I-17, they had the 51, they had the Loop 101, Loop 202. And in Denver, it's still like I-70 is still just 3 lanes through most of the city. How is that possible? And we do have C470 and E470, but E470 is tolled. And then I think C470 now is told at least one direction. The reason I know that is because on my way back from Arizona, I accidentally got into a new toll lane when I didn't even realize it, and then I exited it before I was supposed to. And instead of paying like the $2 toll, I got a $75 ticket for exiting the toll lane before I was supposed to. So you add all of that stuff up, and it does get frustrating. The light rail is fun, but is it really practical?
Yeah,
I would have no problem using light rail, but I would have to go drive several miles. It's just not practical for me.
I'm not very familiar with, utilizing other cities, public transit systems on like a regular like basis for like commuting, but just my limited experience with the light rail, I just feel like there's never anybody on it. Like I've only been on the light rail, to be honest with you, maybe 3 or 4 times, but just like when I'm ever, parking near one of the pickup spots or just see them, at nighttime, like driving or, on the track, going next to the highway, for example, I see that a lot on Santa Fe on Highway 85 driving down to my house. And there's just never anybody on them. It always just looks empty. And I just wonder if that's due to, we have a fairly good system in place, but once you, for example, get off, then you still got to get to wherever you're going. And that's a mile that you don't have public transit available for. There's just like, I don't know if it's just some little gaps and holes that they have in the system, but it sure doesn't seem like it's being used nearly to the level of other big cities. Like I think of like San Francisco back in the day when I had my grandparents living out there with the BART, the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, and just how, I think the place was packed, couldn't even, you have to get on the early one just to get a seat. Otherwise you'd be standing going into the city. That, that kind of difference.
We did some traveling this past year over to Europe, and I would say that was one of the things that really stuck out to me about Europe was just all of the different transportation options. For example, Paris, they have a subway stop literally every block in every direction. So there's a subway right there. And if that specific line isn't going to where you need to go, there's enough lines where it's very easy to transfer. They're also very big on biking in Europe as well. So many bikes, and the biking traffic was so organized. It was just incredible. And then when we were in Berlin, there were subways, bike lanes, and then also trolleys up on top. So you had the trolleys above ground, the subways below ground, and then they had bike lanes built into all of the car traffic. So really, really incredible stuff. And that is unfortunately one of the things that we don't, we've always had issues with our congestion, but not just that, also the quality of the roads as well. And it's like every time I go get my car tuned up and get my alignment fixed, I'm going over these massive potholes, and it's screwing it up again. So that does get frustrating. But then even you have like some of these side streets too. Some of these, like Wadsworth, for example. How long does it feel like Wadsworth has been under construction down by I-70? I mean, it seems like it's been decades, doesn't it?
I hate Wadsworth.
I mean, it's
Hate
like it's
Wadsworth.
still under construction after all of these years.
Yeah. And in addition to this, the traffic congestion, there's also some really crazy stats when it just comes to our air quality in Colorado and Denver specifically. I think you had put some notes together about just the rankings of air quality for 2024, and we were at 7th. And that's not 7th best, that's 7th worst. Wildfire smoke, just this pollution from more urban, environments here in Denver now as we're growing, on a pretty, up until this year, we were going on a pretty consistent basis. Water scarcity due to a lot of the droughts that we've been having. There's just a lot of environmental concerns too. And, Denver is becoming very, very progressive with our politics, which obviously is typically favoring environmental, conservation and, being very pro, environmental, related stuff. It seems like there's like something missing there. We're really not improving on that either, despite being a progressive state.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I feel like not just Denver, but and not just the United States, but humanity. We just need to do a much better job of managing the resources that we have. And right now, there are just so many, hurricanes. We have the wildfires in California. We've always had wildfire problems here, but it just seems like this stuff is getting more and more frequent, and the intensity and the damage is it's unprecedented. So what does that mean? Do we have to change how we live? One thing that I really like about some of these new construction, these new builders and the communities that they're building, is they are going to the zero-scaping, being a little bit more mindful of how we're using our water. And that's what I've said. You'll see cities like Phoenix, for example, so many golf courses, so many lawns, and it's just unnecessary. That is not the most responsible use of those resources down there, especially when you hear these reports about the crisis with the Colorado River and all of these other things. So how do we figure that out? And how do we start to live in a way that's a little bit more unselfish and just improve some of these environmental health categories?
Yep, agreed. Well, let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors before we tackle the remaining 2 topics here.
Looking for a real estate team that goes beyond closing deals? At Adams Sells Denver, we're here to guide buyers, sellers, and investors with strategies tailored just for you. Visit adamsellsdenver.com for free resources or call 970-500-0252 to get started today.
Thank you to our sponsor today. We really appreciate the support. Moving on to
and I was just going to say something about our sponsor. Our sponsor is killing it right now on social media, and you have probably seen him on social media at the Adam Sells Denver team. He's just doing a phenomenal job with his content, with his ads, and just what the value that he's providing. So he's just our awesome job to our sponsor.
Well, I'm sure our sponsor appreciates that. I'll let him know. So the 4th thing we're going to talk about, again, why people are moving out of Denver, which is very different from what we're used to over the last, 40 years, is just how other states are more attractive. A couple of directions we can go with this. Ben, let's start off by just talking about taxes and affordability. We already talked a little bit about just the affordability of homes. So let's talk a little bit more about taxes. I know we spoke earlier about, the metro districts and some of these issues with where to identify homes in Denver to limit the amount of taxes you're spending. But let's just talk a little bit more about taxes first.
Yeah, when it comes to taxes, specifically, let's talk about income tax, and then let's dive into some property tax stuff. But with the income taxes, a lot of times you'll hear professional athletes saying, "I chose this team or this market because they're in this state, and this state doesn't have income tax." And there are states out there that have zero income tax. Texas, Florida, zero income tax. Here in Colorado, we have, I believe it's around 4 to 5% in state income tax. Um, and that matters. That's something that if it matters to someone who is wealthy and is a professional athlete, it's something that the rest of us should. It doesn't mean that we need to make the same decision, but it's something that we should, at a minimum, at least be aware of.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, I didn't see the full list of the top 10 states that people are moving to, but I know that Texas and Florida have been on that list, I think, pretty consistently recently. So that's got to be enough of a driver for a lot of people to choose to move to states that have either low or no state income tax.
Mm-hmm. And then let's talk about affordability, the value of your dollar in the Denver market compared to some of these other markets. This to me is always what is so eye-opening. You think of our average home price or our median home price here in Denver being at 585,000. And the reason I say this is because I'll go to my brother lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I mean you can legit get a southern mansion or a southern plantation type property that has acreage and I mean just stunning, just absolutely stunning what how far your dollar goes in some of these other markets. And so if you have the ability to work remotely and you want to go live in a 6,000 square foot home in a certain area, like there are opportunities available and there are people that do that.
I forgot the name of the ratio, but when it's comparing the average or the median home price versus the
Mm-hmm.
median or average household salary, so what it costs to live. I guess that would be the cost of, not cost of living. I'm trying to what that, there's a term for that, I think, but I always think of like Houston had one of the highest, meaning that the average income is very high in comparison
Mm-hmm.
to the average home prices, which is very low. So that gap or that ratio between the two is really advantageous in places, again, like Texas, Florida, Tulsa, a lot of places other than
So
Denver.
high household income combined with low home values
Correct. Yep.
or lower home values. Okay.
And I think when it has to do with that specific ratio, Denver is definitely in the bottom third, if not even lower. So this is
Yeah.
just another example of just this affordability, just piece of this topic.
And I almost like I don't feel like in Denver, I don't feel that we have outrageous wages here. I don't feel like people are getting paid substantially more in Denver than they are in other markets. I just feel that our housing is very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel like if you're a single, and we didn't talk about this, but it's almost, I mean, if you're a single person in Denver, you only have, there's, you're not married or you don't have a partner and you're just living by, that is difficult. If you only have one income, and a lot of the loans that I will do, I mean, almost all of them are, husband, wife, or, partners. And in some cases, husband, wife, child, or brother-in-law, multiple applicants on the loan. And that's kind of what it takes to purchase in Denver because, not all the time, but for first time home buyers and for affordability purposes, it can be very difficult.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I would love for you guys, if you're curious about other ways to kind of get creative. Denver recently passed in November of last year of 2024 a lowering of the restrictions in the city of Denver when it comes to ADU units, so accessory dwelling units, basically meaning that you can have a second structure on your home, on your property, I should say, and even have that as a rental. It could be an additional, bedroom with a small kitchenette and a bath where you could, have a second part of your family, maybe living there with you, like Ben was just saying, maybe like a,
Yeah.
a father-in-law or, something like that. But just getting creative on ways to generate more, monthly, doesn't have to necessarily be an income property, meaning a rental, but just figuring out a way just to have the ability to have more money generating from that property to cover this higher cost of living and just the higher home prices.
Yeah, I am seeing more and more people do that. Have you seen some of these newer communities with the builders? They're building these multi-generational homes
No.
where there's literally another like single family unit attached to the primary home, except it's for, you know,
Oh, yeah.
in-laws or
Yep.
parents, and it's right there and it's attached. And so I hadn't seen that until a couple of years ago, but I'm seeing way more ADUs. I'm so glad that Denver relaxed the guidelines there because that is so needed. I'm seeing friends build ADUs. I got a fun fact for you here. You probably don't know this, but what is the difference between a mother-in-law unit and a father-in-law unit?
Hmm. I don't want to get in trouble, so I don't know. I'll just let you answer that.
You don't want to offend anyone.
No.
Mother-in-law unit is ground level. Father-in-law unit is elevated.
Hmm.
And so, for example, if there was a home that sold in my neighborhood, there was a unit, there was a garage, a three-car garage, and then above that, there was a unit, an accessory unit. So that would be a father-in-law unit.
Interesting. Okay.
Something on the ground, a typical ADU would be a mother-in-law unit.
Hmm. Did not know that. That's very interesting. All right, well, let's just close this one out with our fifth reason that we brought up today. Just again, all about why people are leaving Denver. And this is kind of looking into the future. So, future implications that might be on the horizon here in Denver.
Do you
This
have
could,
your crystal ball?
I don't have my crystal ball today. I do have the notes in front of me, just have a few ideas of what we're going to share about this one. But what would you start off with? What do you think is the most kind of impactful for just what's going to be coming into in the future here in Denver?
Yeah, I think what's the most impactful is there's kind of two things. What is actually going to happen with interest rates, number one, and it's starting to feel like because everyone has just been waiting for interest rates to come down. They were waiting for them to come down in 23 and then 24. We got to the tail end of 24 and everyone said they're going to come down in 25, and now it's looking like that's not going to be happening from the guidance from the Fed. Even though the Fed has reduced the Fed funds rate by over a full percentage point, mortgage interest rates are higher than before the 100 basis point cut. And the reason for that is because the outlook is now not as optimistic, where the Fed had initially said they were going to reduce rates 4 to 5 times in 2025. And now they're saying it's going to be one or two. So that's number one, what is going to happen with interest rates. But number two, this is probably even more important. When is the market going to just start to accept that this is the new reality? And when is everyone going to say when is everyone going to stop waiting for interest rates to come down? And what I'm encouraged by is I'm starting to see signs of that right now, where folks are starting to accept that interest rates are going to be higher and they're kind of coming off the sidelines. For example, I've had more refinance applications this past month than I probably have had in the past 18 months.
Wow,
And
awesome.
it's because the folks that need the refinance bailout, they've put themselves in a tough spot, or there was some type of life event that happened. Maybe they have some increased credit card debt. Instead of they had been waiting for rates to come down, because let's face it, it's difficult walking away from a 2 or 3% mortgage. But when you can consolidate your debt, and even if it means your mortgage rate is going up to 7, but you're still saving $2,000 a month in total cash outflow, you're starting to see those folks come off the sidelines and kind of accept where the market's at. So I'm seeing that, and then I'm also seeing that more buyers are starting to kind of just put feelers out. I'm getting more phone calls as far as just wanting to talk through things or scenarios. And this is typically a slower time of year. So all of that, I would say, is very positive for the 2025 market. I'm not saying that 2025 is going to be a crazy year where property values skyrocket. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think things will, or could pick up a little bit, at least compared to where they've been the last 2 years.
Yep, I agree with that. And the only thing I would add to that is your comment about when is it going to become more of a reality, or people are just going to accept it. And you think about life changes, not just people's budgets and credit card debt and that angle, but also just the dynamic of their family. Let's just say you have a couple kids that have been sharing a bedroom, and your plan all along was to, upgrade to a larger home maybe a year ago, and you guys are just kind of, waiting it out, waiting for those interest rates to drop. There's only so much time that a family in scenarios like that are going to hold out before the life event, or the getting their kids their own bedrooms, or getting a larger home for a new baby that's on the way. There's some things like that that people might
Yeah.
suck it up and hold off for maybe a year, maybe even two, but at some point there's going to be more and more people, I think, that are just going to cave in and just realize that this isn't going to change anytime soon, so we might as well make the best of it and move forward and take that next step.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thought. And if you have the space, this is something where normally I am in favor of buying a new house, but this is a question that you might want to ask yourself: just doing an addition or converting part of your house, if it made sense, and if you can find a qualified contractor, because there's been a lot of that going along too, where you have these contractors that will just steal money, or they'll do the job halfway and then leave the homeowner high and dry. But my brother, for example, in Tulsa, he was faced with that same prospect. Just had his fourth kid about a year ago, and he was like, "Well, do we upgrade?" The negative, though, like everyone else, is if he upgraded, his mortgage payment would have tripled, because he's owned his home for 12 years, has a historically low interest rate. And so what they decided to do was convert their garage, because they had a carport and a garage. And so they decided to convert the garage. They spent like 25,000 creating an extra living area and a bedroom there. And so they added some equity to the property through sweat equity, but then they still had a really nice, essentially they then converted the carport to a garage. So they still had a 2-car garage. Now they increased their square footage by 1,000 square feet, and they did it at a minimal cost. So I'm not saying that's going to be appropriate for everyone, but kind of like you're saying, there's multiple ways to kind of think through this. Ultimately, what I want to happen is for the specific homeowner to make an informed decision. These are the things that you got to consider.
Yep. Love that. At the end of the day, it's just up to that, whoever that person is that's making that decision, and it might be right for some, might not be right for others. So everybody has a very unique scenario.
My dream house, though, going back to the accessory unit, I would love to have a property that has an accessory unit. And I love the idea of just having like a really big garage, 3, 4, 5-car garage, and then having a living area on top of that. I just think that would be so private. It could be a rec room, but you could put a little kitchen up there with a bedroom and make it a legit living area.
You need to get yourself one of those barn dominiums, baby.
I know. Yeah. I mean, my kids are teenagers now, and it's kind of scary to think, but what are they going to do?
They're going to live with dad for the rest of their lives.
Not with the way they've been behaving.
Yeah, not happening.
I'm gonna need to do a construction loan after when they are finally of age and move out, with all the holes in the wall and stuff. I mean, gosh.
Well, I think all 5 of those were at least good starting points for some of the reasons why, unfortunately, a lot of people are vacating, leaving Denver. It's interesting just to even be having this conversation. I think that we're biased because we both live here and love Colorado, but there's so many people in the country, 360 million, people in the US. The fact that, Denver and Colorado just doesn't have enough people interested in the state, despite some of these burdens with cost of living and, affordability, you think that there would still be enough people to kind of offset that to some extent, but I guess not. So that's really a good indication of where we're at in the world right now.
Yep.
Well, Ben, any final words before I close this out?
I don't think so. Thank you to all the fans and everyone that's reached out over the last year. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out directly. Leave those in the comments. Follow us on social. We'd love to connect, feature any questions that you have, and hey, maybe even have you as a guest on the Pursuit of Progress podcast.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and we look forward to sharing a brand new episode with you guys. They come out every single Friday. Look forward to sharing this one with you guys on an all-new episode of The Pursuit of Progress. See ya.
Season 2. See you guys.
Season 2.